A very wet Cape Town in front of the St. George's Cathedral. Welcome again. My name is Vuyo Mvogo.
And my name is Bongiwe Zwane. Vuyo, we were talking off camera about this moment and thinking back to that hymn, Pula tsa lehlohonolo hadina ka medupi, hohle ke diphororo le nna hle o nghopole. And loosely translated, a hymn about the blessings that come with the rain and the moment that this symbolizes as we now find ourselves in the rain. And Nzinga, to really help us make sense of this moment is someone that we alluded to at the beginning of this broadcast for you. Reverend Peter Storey is back with us this morning. This is someone that has walked with the Arch a journey of 46 years when it comes to their friendship. He was also at some point the president of the South African Council of Churches, and if there's really one person that has gone through some turbulent times with the Arch, it's really him. And Reverend, good morning to you. And thank you so much for coming back again this morning. A difficult day it is and must be for you to say goodbye to your friend. But at the same time, I'm looking at the weather and the blessings that really this brings about.
Well, Cape Town doesn't have climate, it just has weather. And it's turning it all on for us. And for a city that was without a drop of water a couple of years ago, we're always grateful. And we know that rain is pula, it is a blessing. So it's a special blessing for today's service, yes.
Actually, today I want us to perhaps start on a different note, something we didn't talk a lot about yesterday. And we touched on fond memories you had, the things you did together, the things he did for the church, broadly speaking, but also the things the Arch did for the country. And in your relationship, both at a personal level, but also at the level of the South African Council of Churches, just to bring our viewers or put our viewers in the picture, you were the one in the first place who nominated the Arch for the position of General Secretary of the South African Council of Churches in the first place. Buti Tlhagale was the president and you were the vice president. And at some point, if I recall from John Allen's biography of the Arch, you had to chair a meeting where the various denominations, or some denominations, including, of course, people within the Anglican Church itself, had very serious issues with how the Arch's pronouncements on sanctions in particular. And it was a very tough and difficult period because it threatened, to divide the South African Council of Churches.
Absolutely. And sometimes we wonder whether church gatherings can ever really truly hear the word of God. But I think we heard it that day. Desmond had been to Denmark. Desmond had called for Denmark to boycott South Africa's coal. It caused an enormous furore and perhaps was the first really public call for sanctions, which had taken place at his initiative. And when he came home, there was a bit of outrage. The member churches struggled with this. They had a wide constituency of members, some of them very conservative and so on. And so I felt it important to call a meeting and bring the heads of the churches together and to say, look, we've got to decide who this person is going to be for us. Who is he going to be? Is he going to be the mouthpiece of the churches toward the state? Or is he something more than that? And that was the debate. What was the role of a general secretary who quite clearly had been called by God to be a prophet? And it was a tough debate, and it was a good debate. And slowly we came to a complete consensus. And it was this, that we mustn't want Desmond simply to be the prophet to the state. He needs to be the prophet to the churches, because there were all sorts of things in the churches that need to be challenged around race, around discrimination, around inequality. And so we must expect his word to disturb us just as much as it disturbed those in the union buildings. It was a great day, and I think it clarified things.
And I wonder, in that moment for you, because in the beginning, you were not really convinced by the call. What convinced you then to get to that point where you say, is he going to speak for us? Or are we going to basically leave him out? Because at that time, Reverend, one of the things that was also happening is that he was being vilified. A lot of people were starting to single him out and were hoping probably the church wouldn't join that call.
Absolutely. I think we need to remember today, as we have this amazing experience of giving thanks for this incredible life, we need to remember there was a time when Desmond was hated by so many people, particularly white South Africans. I remember when we welcomed him back from receiving the Nobel Peace Prize. Elizabeth, my wife, was his personal assistant for 5 years. She knew him better than I did. And we were in the airport, and there was somebody next to me, a woman, who hissed as Desmond came towards us, and she said aloud, if I had a gun now, he would not leave this airport. That was the kind of thing he lived with at that time. My job as his president, and technically his boss, I suppose, you can't be Desmond's boss, nobody can, but my job was to back him up in every way I possibly could, and to strengthen him to do his task. On the issue of sanctions, many people struggled with that initially. I was one of them. And the usual feelings about who will sanctions hurt most. But the argument that Desmond presented ultimately was, listen to who is calling for these sanctions. It's the people who are hurting most, and therefore they have the right to make that call. And ultimately, of course, he was out ahead of so many of us, and we had to acknowledge that, because ultimately it was sanctions more than anything else that brought the apartheid regime to an end. It certainly wasn't what some people call the armed struggle, which was really a sideshow, if you think in military terms. It was the sanctions that broke the back of the regime.
Now, speaking of your responsibilities at the time, having to back him up and having to ensure that you helped him do his job, you had difficult moments in that relationship as well, didn't you? There was a time when some people helped themselves to South African Council of Churches funds, and there was a time when you felt that he wasn't giving the issue. He wasn't responsible, of course. He himself wasn't responsible. I mean, for that, it was his predecessor, by and large. You felt that he wasn't giving the issue a great deal of attention, and that he was out at one time, spent 6 weeks in the United States, and right in the middle of that, and at that point it actually exploded in, I think it was a briefing or something in the US, where he was confronted with these questions, and didn't put up a particularly good show, and you short of reprimanding him, you had some tough words for him at that particular point.
Well, there were two issues there. The first was the issue of, we had to decide again, who did Desmond belong to? Did he belong to us, or was it something bigger? I remember again welcoming him back from his Nobel Peace Prize and saying to him, today you belong to the world. And that was true. But of course it's hard to cope with that when he is the executive head of an organization. And so we had to try and balance this world responsibility, which of course was bringing attention to the struggle in South Africa, with the day-to-day grind of running a large organization. And Desmond was not a detail man. He never was. And we didn't ask him to be that. But it was a bit of a crisis at that time. The second issue was the issue of the state's attempt to somehow prove something about us. And they managed to get hold of some financial issues. We were not perfectly organized at that time. We were running from hand to mouth, crisis to crisis every day. And one of the issues, of course, was around Desmond's predecessor, John Rees. And here there was a serious dilemma for me. I was Desmond's president. I was there to back him up and support him totally. John Rees was a member of my congregation, a very close personal friend who I loved and respected. And I personally, and up to this day, am absolutely clear that John did not take any money. But as the police kept pegging away, they were very, very strategic about it. And the issue was what was best for the Council of Churches ultimately. So Desmond and I, our paths divided a little there. And ultimately I felt I should get out the way, which I did, because I think that's the right thing to do. However, the important thing again is to remind people that this was somebody who you could disagree with sort of strongly on one day and you'd be laughing together the next. Desmond could not hold a grudge of any kind. And so very soon he was nominating me for an honorary presidency of the council, and we were back together as brothers. And so that itself is an illustration of, I think, of how Christians should differ and how Christians should reconcile.
And Vuyo, that's really at the heart of friendship, isn't it? When you can disagree, you can be able to then come back together. And it also talks about the journey of 46 years, which was real. And Reverend, unfortunately, we have to leave it there. But I do hope that this conversation will continue throughout the course of the morning as we build up to the funeral, of course, at 10 o'clock. And it will be right here. And interestingly enough, Vuyo, one of the people that we can expect to see as part of the procession is the former Americana Commission's chairperson, retired Judge Ian Farlam.
Yes, indeed. And of course, just to be clear, the SABC will be bringing you the funeral service of Archbishop Desmond Tutu live here on this channel and both channels, SABC 2 and channel 404, live, not only live, but uninterrupted as well. So as we build up, to stay with us, but do remember also that the service itself will be brought to you uninterrupted by your national public broadcaster, the SABC.